I'm Shauna Warner with Natural Awakenings Magazine in Oklahoma, and you've joined us on Conversations With, where we take a few minutes out of the day and talk with providers and practitioners throughout the state of Oklahoma about health and wellness. We kind of look at the holistic life and what does that mean and how do you live that way? What can you do, to improve your health and wellness this time of year? So today we're joined by Lee Ancrum of the Ancrum Institute in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hi, Lee.
Hi, Shauna.
So, I always enjoy conversing with you because I always learn something really fun and new. And this time of year, we're talking, as the end of the year comes and we've got a new year beginning, people are always going to be talking about, health and wellness in the new year. But I want to turn around this time of the year and talk about sugar.
Okay.
let's just do this because visions of sugar plums dancing in your head. This is one of those traditional
Right.
holiday themes, and yet we know sugar isn't quite that good for you, is it, Lee?
No, it's not even isn't quite. It's definitely not. But, sugar is so, let's just say it's the holidays and we're all like eating lots of fun things. And,
Hmm.
there's family recipes, there's all sorts of things going on.
Hmm.
And trust me, I totally get it, but we don't want to fool ourselves into thinking that sugar's not so bad because sugar actually is bad.
Hmm.
And the big thing, what the big thing about sugar is that how
What?
addictive. It's very addictive,
Yeah.
very addictive. And I know me personally that if I have a little, then I want a
What
little
more?
more and more, and it kind of escalates and stuff. But
Yeah.
what I also would like to do is not only talk about sugar, but also include, like just be talking about holiday foods and holiday desserts and how that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I was thinking when we were talking about this is to sort of share also, like, what do simple carbs do? Sugar's in the simple carbs, and
Okay.
and I also, the way I really wanted to kind of share with you is to talk about how, what kind of symptoms you actually get in your body from too many carbs, too much sugar, too many of those things. Okay.
Super. Yeah.
Okay.
What is
Great.
that like?
Okay, so one of the things that happens in our bodies, because that's me, I'm a body person, I'm not a doctor or a naturopath, but I do know the body well, is that, as I've probably said on your show, and if I haven't, I've said it on my own live things, is that, most of the pain patterns in our body is coming out of organs. So when you think about that, the percentage I've read is 65 to 95% of the pain you're having in your muscles is coming
Hmm.
from an organ. So let's talk about the pain patterns that you get out of eating all that sugar and all those carbs.
Okay.
Okay. For one thing, carbs do convert, simple carbs. I don't want to say complex, but simple carbs do tend to convert into fat like that,
Hmm.
so the breads and the stuffing and,
All the good stuff.
all the good stuff, the gravy and the mashed potatoes. It's my favorite meal of the year. What can I say? But anyway, so they do tend to convert into fat, so like stored fat is what I want to say, is like
Hmm.
stored fat in the body.
Okay.
And the other thing that's happening is that your pancreas, which is in the left side of your body under the rib cage, under your stomach,
Okay.
okay? Right in front of your kidney, but under your stomach. So there's your pancreas.
Okay.
So every time you're eating things like sugars and simple carbs and stuff, you're definitely triggering your pancreas to actually to work and to
Okay.
create more insulin. Okay,
Okay.
so it's creating more insulin, and if you don't give yourself like enough times, like you snack too much or do that, your pancreas is constantly running.
Ah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
One of the best things you can do for your pancreas is to give it a breather, meaning that you actually don't eat a lot of snacks and don't snack throughout the day. And, um,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. So, because
Go to break.
otherwise it keeps running, and you end up with something what's called, that's not the only reason you end up with this, but insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is like the early phases of into metabolic syndrome, into
Into
diabetes.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So that's kind of the functional biological way that's happening. The
Mhm.
pain patterns out of the pancreas is you can have your left hip hurting you. Okay.
Mm,
Yes, you
okay.
can. Yep. And if the pancreas is having to overrun, I'm telling you, the pancreas is sitting right over, like, I don't know how to get my hands in the thing, right over your kidney. So
Okay.
one of the things it can do is really create in that left kidney a reduced bit of function, and you have pain in your low back on the left. Okay.
Oh,
Hi.
interesting.
Right.
Okay.
Right. The other thing that happens, and I want to bring another set of thoughts in here in a second, is the other thing that can happen from the pancreas going on in the pancreas is that your left shoulder and neck can hurt.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. So we have those as some of the generalized things, but there's also is that if I'm eating these foods, sugars and, wheat and gluten and all of these sort of
Mhm.
simple carbs, what also can happen is, not to everybody, but it certainly can happen a lot, and it's happening a ton. I see it in my practice all the time, is
Okay.
that it creates inflammation in your body, and it creates inflammation all
All
over your body,
over.
all over. And the
Okay.
places that you really feel them is in the gut, like you feel bloated, and also aching in your joints. Okay, so so especially when somebody says to me, not that, oh, my one joint hurts, like my wrist hurts, but they
Mhm.
tell me, boy, all my joints are achy
All over.
all over. You're looking at something systemic versus something local. Okay, which
Okay.
sounds simple, but it is.
Right.
And
Right.
so the big thing that happens in our bodies
Mhm.
when we have this inflammation that's chronically coming in, not just the holidays, but we certainly get it a lot on these holidays,
Yeah.
is that one of the deals is that with this chronic inflammation is it makes your spleen, which is an immune system organ. And one of the jobs of the spleens is to make white blood cells. So the spleen gets triggered and it says, oh, you've got inflammation. Not just like, oh, I have inflammation because I cut myself. I'm like, you have inflammation. The body reacts the same. The spleen starts working and working and working.
Yeah.
Where does the spleen live? The spleen lives on your left, your exact side
Same
of your
side.
body, under your
Okay.
rib cage, right? On the left side. So what will that do? Left arm pain, left shoulder pain, left neck pain, left hip pain, all the way, can go all the way down to your ankle, left ankle pain. So no matter
Oh.
what, inflammation creating aching, you may feel like you're always full, too full, bloated, those kinds of things in your gut. And you can certainly have all of these different kinds of pain patterns that are happening, in your tissues. So, sometimes you have to take a step back and say, okay, I have neck pain on my left. Where is this coming from? Because it rarely pops up that it's just
Your
here
neck.
for no reason, your neck for
Yeah.
no reason. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That probably is one of the coolest things that I've learned from you is that you may have pain here, but it may be coming from another
Mhm.
issue. And that whole idea about inflammation, that is a process that's going on in your body,
Right.
your whole
Right.
body. So it's
Right.
like, okay, so let's talk a little bit specifically about sugar
And
and
replacing and doing stuff
replacing it.
like that.
Yeah, because I was trying to remember who I saw this from. Some food blogger somewhere said sugar is the cocaine of the food
Yeah.
world. And
Yes, it
you were
is.
talking about how addictive it is.
Yes.
And it's like, I know that anybody that's dealing with their weight issues, they're going to say, yeah, totally. I
Right.
understand. It's in everything. That's
Yeah.
what kind of is
Yes.
weird.
So if we go from the worst thing to ingest is that high fructose corn syrup.
Uh,
Let me tell you that's
get rid
just
of that.
get rid of that because that is beyond the worst thing ever.
Okay,
Okay.
so don't
And
cook with
then,
it and
yeah,
check if it's in the products that you love.
exactly. Check if it's
Something
in
else.
what it is because it's everywhere. It's
Okay.
freaking everywhere. So
Okay.
that's one thing. And then, of course, as we all know, as you and I were talking about earlier, is that replacing white sugars with honey or with maple syrup. Now you have to realize in the body that honey and maple syrup are still going to break down as a sugar, but there are some good things to it as well. So it's better than empty calorie white sugar. So
Hmm.
there is some, health benefit to honey and to maple syrup. It's better, definitely better. But
Okay.
as we were saying, is there is something called monk fruit, and it's a plant, and it has no calories, 0 calories, and 0 glycemic index. So monk fruit has like it doesn't raise your blood sugar. It doesn't do any of those things. Now it can be an acquired taste, I have to tell you.
Yeah.
And and when I cook with it, I have a tendency to use less monk fruit than I would the equivalent in granulated
Great.
sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
We've also tried stevia.
uh,
There's a plant stevia,
right,
and we've used that. I use that like when I want a little bit of sweet in my tea,
right.
or if rarely I'll do that in my coffee, but every once in a while I want a little bit of sweet in my coffee, and so I try that.
Yeah.
Um, we started out trying to do less sugar, and I wanted to share with everybody. That's what it's really cool that this month's edition of Natural Awakenings, we've got some sugar-free treats in the magazine, uh,
Yeah.
talking about this whole idea because we want to enjoy life. We want to have a treat. We
Right.
just don't want sugar every day. And
So, another thought is to use fruit in things,
mm,
is to also
just
get the
natural.
natural
Yeah.
sugars, get the natural sugars. One of the things you got to be careful if you're using a lot of dried fruit, though, is that the sugar content in a dried fruit is so much higher.
Oh, because
So
it's concentrated or something?
yes,
'Cause-
because it's concentrated. So
Interesting.
you have to be careful, just going, oh, let me just start eating dried fruit or putting dried fruit and everything. So, but it is also a fruit, but it definitely has a higher sugar. Like one thing that I've been known to do is that like when sometimes if I'm making a pie, okay, or something, in specific a pie,
Mhm.
I will use nuts and grind. No, I don't eat almonds because I react to almonds, but pecans and walnuts and other nuts, and
Mhm.
I'll grind them in the food processor. And then when they're the consistency of like ground up graham cracker, I'll
Mhm.
start dropping in dates. And so, so I put somewhere between 4 and 5 pitted dates into there, and it makes it like a graham cracker crust. And I just pat that. So now you have nuts, which are protein, and
Mhm.
you're not in the carbs. And
Yeah.
the other thing is that you've got dates as your binder. And then what I do is I actually just put it in the freezer and let it be in the freezer for a couple of hours. It doesn't freeze, but it solidifies. So
Mhm.
there's thoughts around, changing up some things to do things a little differently,
Yeah.
and that's a delicious crust. Let me tell you, it's
I
just
bet that is.
delicious.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
I think that the number one thing is awareness, starting watching what you eat, going, what is in this and how much sugar? I was amazed at how much sugar is in ketchup. It's
Oh,
like
wow.
I had no
Yeah.
idea, a condiment. It's like, and it's loaded with sugar. So it's like
Yeah.
that awareness is number one. And then start experimenting. We've like I said, we've got a great recipe. I'm going to try this
Yeah.
weekend on page 20 for a cookie, a whole wheat cookie for the holidays. It's made with honey, just half a cup of honey in this whole cookie recipe. And I thought, okay, we're going to try that.
Yeah.
Um,
Nice. Nice.
yeah. So we want to make sure that people know that you can reach out to Lee at theincomeinstitute.com. You can reach out to Lee through the magazine. All of her information is in the magazine. There is a fabulous student clinic is the clinic going on every month? Is that a monthly or?
Well, in the new year, I'm teaching so much that it's going to be every other month.
Okay, every other month.
It'll
You
be
can
every
reach
other.
out to the Income Institute, right? And
Right,
people
and
can get
we'll
information about that.
let you, it's also on the website, so the dates of
Okay.
the clinic will be on the website.
Okay,
2020.
so reach out to Lee. Also, I want to make sure and invite people, if you have a specific question or an issue you would like Lee to talk about, to address, then we'd be happy to do that too. So want to make sure. And we might see if we can convince Lee to give us that recipe again.
Ooh,
We'll
happy
write
to.
it up, for the crust, because that sounds fabulous. A really good idea. Maybe write some of those the amounts down, Lee, because I would love to do that. Because a pie crust made with almonds, I know not for you, or walnuts and dates, that sounds
Mhm.
fabulous.
Yep, it
Okay.
is. I'll be happy to.
Okay, so we're going to get that from Lee, and we're going to try, something different, maybe a little less sugar, a little more love.
I love that. That's great. That's
Thank
great.
you, Lee, so much.
Thank you.
Guys,
Thank you. Happy holidays, everybody.
happy
Thank you.
holidays to you too. We will see you for sure in the new year. I want to make sure that everybody knows you can read Natural Awakenings online, all of us for free, naoklahoma.com. You can pick it up, all sorts of places throughout Tulsa and Oklahoma City, and go check out some of these great recipes for sugar-free treats. Thanks, Lee.
Thanks.
I'll see you later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, guys. I'm Shauna Warner, and you've been enjoying a conversation with. I'll see you next time.